My name is Harley. I am 34 years old and I just landed my dream job with a salary of $400,000 a year. Growing up in a household where money was always scarce, this felt like winning the lottery. But when I shared the news with my family, my father looked me dead in the eyes and said, 50% for us, 30% for your sister, no excuses. That afternoon I packed everything I owned and stopped paying their bills. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe to join me on this journey of finally standing up for myself after years of financial manipulation. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago where our family lived in a modest 3-bedroom house that always seemed to need repairs my father never got around to fixing. My father, Richard, worked as a sales manager at a local car dealership. On paper, he made good money, but you would never know it by the way we lived. Dad always had an air of authority about him, standing at 6 feet 2 inches with broad shoulders and a booming voice that could silence a room. He controlled every aspect of our family life, especially the finances. Money does not grow on trees, Harley. He would lecture me constantly. Everything in this house comes from my hard work. The irony was that most of our financial problems stemmed from his gambling habit. Every other weekend, he would disappear to the riverboat casinos along the Mississippi, returning either jubilant with temporary winnings or more often sullen and quick to anger after losing. My mother, Diane, was the opposite of my father in every way. Petite with soft-spoken mannerisms, she worked as a receptionist at a dental office, but never seemed to have any say in how her paycheck was spent. She would just nod along with whatever Dad decided, her eyes downcast, her opinions silenced years ago. Your father knows best, she would whisper to me whenever I questioned their decisions. Just try not to upset him. Her entire existence seemed dedicated to keeping the peace even at the cost of her own dignity. Then there was my sister Amanda, 2 years younger than me, but somehow always the center of attention. Amanda was the golden child, the one who got new clothes while I wore hand-me-downs, the one whose extracurricular activities were priorities, while mine were luxuries we could not afford. Your sister is more delicate than you, my mother would explain. She needs more support. This translated to Amanda never having to work a day during high school, while I started bussing tables at 14 just to have money for school supplies. Our household had a predictable rhythm of financial crisis, followed by temporary relief, followed by another crisis. The electricity would get shut off. Dad would borrow money from his brother. Lectures about spending less would follow, and within months, we would be back in the same situation. Through it all, I was expected to contribute while Amanda was protected. The summer before my sophomore year of high school, I landed my first official job at a local grocery store. I still remember the pride I felt receiving my first paycheck of $326 for 2 weeks of after-school shifts. That pride evaporated quickly when my father held out his hand as soon as I got home. Family contribution, he declared, taking the entire check. This will help with the water bill. I never saw a penny of that money, nor of most of the paychecks that followed. Meanwhile, Amanda received $100 of allowance monthly for keeping her grades up, even though my grades were better. Technology became my escape. The school computer lab became my sanctuary during lunch periods and after classes. I taught myself coding through free online resources, spending hours at the public library when our home internet was cut off for non-payment. While my father gambled away his paychecks, and my mother made excuses for him, I was building a foundation for my future. Always on those computers, my father would scoff. How is that going to put food on the table? Despite his dismissal, I applied for and won a partial scholarship to the state university to study computer science. It only covered about 60% of the tuition, so I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college to make up the difference and pay for my books and living expenses. I lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, sharing a 2-bedroom place with 3 other students to keep costs down. Even during college, the financial demands from home never stopped. Every crisis was somehow my responsibility to solve. Car repairs, medical bills, the time Amanda crashed her car without insurance, all of these became my problems. We supported you your whole life, my father would remind me during his calls asking for money. This is what family does. What hurt most was how my father would take credit for my achievements in front of others. At family gatherings, he would brag about putting his son through college, and how all those computer games finally paid off, as if my success was his creation. not something I had achieved, despite his obstacles. The final straw from my college years came when I had saved $2,000 toward a used car. I had been taking the bus for over an hour each way to get to classes and my job. The money was in my account for less than a week when my parents called about the property tax bill they had forgotten about. After 3 days of guilt trips and my mother crying on the phone, I transferred the money to them. They bought Amanda a spring break trip to Florida 2 months later. These patterns continued through my early 20s. Each time I tried to establish financial independence, some family emergency would pull me back in. I became the family bank expected to provide without question while trying to build my own life from scratch. The worst part was that I normalized this treatment, believing that this was what all families did, that children were supposed to support their parents indefinitely, regardless of the cost to their own futures. After graduating with my computer science degree, I took a junior developer position at a small software company in Chicago. The starting salary was modest, $48,000 a year, but it was a foot in the door of the industry I had worked so hard to enter. My first apartment was barely 500 square feet, a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom where my knees hit the wall when I sat on the toilet. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, and that meant everything. The learning curve at my first job was steep. I was working with technologies I had only read about in textbooks, and my colleagues all seemed light years ahead of me in experience. Rather than getting discouraged, I turned it into an opportunity. I stayed late every evening, absorbing everything I could, volunteering for the projects no one else wanted to take on. "You are not getting paid for those extra hours," my father commented when I mentioned my schedule during a Sunday phone call. "I am getting paid in knowledge," I replied, a concept he never seemed to understand. While my day job provided a stable income, I knew I needed more education to advance quickly in the tech world. After my regular 9 to 5, I took night courses to earn additional certifications in network security and database management. My social life was practically non-existent, but every new skill I acquired was another step toward the career I envisioned. By my second year, I had received my first promotion to mid-level developer with a salary increase to $62,000. It was still modest by industry standards, but it represented progress. I celebrated by buying myself a reliable used Honda and opening my first investment account with $200 a month automatic deposits. My third year brought another promotion after I led a successful project implementing a new customer management system. The senior developer position came with more responsibility and a bump to $78,000 annually. I moved to a slightly larger apartment in a better neighborhood, though I kept my expenses low, remembering the financial instability of my childhood. Through it all, the requests from home never stopped. Amanda needed help with her credit card debt. The roof was leaking. Dad had a temporary cash flow problem. Each time I would help, though, I had started setting limits, offering what I could afford rather than what they demanded. "We did not raise you to be selfish," my mother said, when I could only send $500 instead of the $2,000 they wanted for Amanda's car repairs. By my late 20s, I had job hopped to a medium-sized tech company, increasing my salary to $110,000. I was finally building substantial savings and investments. I had also found my specialization in cloud architecture, an emerging field with significant demand. I pursued advanced certifications and became known for solving complex integration problems that other developers avoided. The most valuable relationship I built during these years was with Michael, a senior architect I met at a tech conference. Unlike my other colleagues who were just professional acquaintances, Michael became a true friend and mentor. He was 10 years older than me, accomplished in the field, and most importantly, he recognized my potential before I fully saw it myself. "You are undervaluing yourself," he told me over beers after reviewing my latest project. "You could be making twice what you are now at the right company." With Michael's encouragement, I started applying for more ambitious positions. There were rejections along the way, interviews where I was clearly out of my depth, but each one was a learning experience. I kept detailed notes on what questions stumped me, then went home and studied those topics until I mastered them. Last month, an opportunity arose at Horizon Technologies, one of the most innovative cloud service providers in the country. They were looking for a principal cloud architect to lead a new division focused on artificial intelligence integration. The position required extensive experience with technologies I had been specializing in for years. The interview process was grueling, 4 rounds over 3 weeks, including a technical challenge that required me to design a scalable architecture for a hypothetical client with complex requirements. I spent an entire weekend on the challenge, sleeping only a few hours each night to perfect my solution. When my phone rang with Horizon's offer, I was walking to my car after a long day at my current job. The recruiter's voice was enthusiastic as she shared the news. "We would like to offer you the principal cloud architect position, Harley. The compensation package includes a base salary of $400,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and stock options." I had to ask her to repeat the number, certain I had misheard. $400,000. It was nearly 4 times my current salary. I stood in the parking lot, keys in hand, unable to move as the reality sunk in. This was life-changing money, the kind of income that could secure my future, allow me to buy a home instead of renting, to build substantial investments, to finally achieve the financial security I had been working toward my entire adult life. That evening I met Michael at our favorite bar to celebrate. He ordered champagne, insisting that this achievement deserved proper recognition. "I told you," he said, raising his glass. "They are lucky to have you. This is just the beginning." As we talked about the opportunity, Michael asked about my plans for the money. "First, a down payment on a condo," I said. "Then maxing out my retirement accounts. Maybe actually taking a vacation for once." "Your family will be thrilled," Michael commented, and I felt a twinge of anxiety at the mention of them. Despite our complicated history, I still wanted to share my success with my parents and sister. Part of me hoped that with this achievement they might finally see me differently, not as a resource to tap, but as a son who had accomplished something significant. I decided to drive to their house that weekend, to share the news in person, imagining their proud faces, perhaps even an acknowledgement of how far I had come despite the challenges. It was a decision I would soon regret. I arrived at my parents' house on Saturday evening, carrying a bottle of champagne and 3 takeout bags from their favorite steakhouse. The familiar scent of my mother's potpourri, mixed with the musty smell of the aging carpet, hit me as I walked through the door. The house looked the same as always, perhaps a bit more worn around the edges, the furniture showing its age, the paint slightly yellowed. "Look who finally remembered where he came from," my father called from his recliner, not bothering to get up. He was watching a baseball game, a beer balanced on the armrest. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Harley, what a surprise. And you brought food." Her eyes lit up at the sight of the bags. "Amanda, your brother is here with dinner." Amanda appeared from upstairs, her hair wrapped in a towel. At 32, she still lived at home, working part-time at a boutique downtown while my parents covered most of her expenses. She broke into a smile when she saw the food. "Fancy steakhouse." "What is the occasion?" she asked, peering into the bags. I helped my mother set the table, while explaining that I had some news to share. Once we were all seated with plates of filet mignon and loaded baked potatoes, I took a deep breath and made my announcement. "I got a new job," I began, trying to keep my voice casual despite my excitement. "A principal cloud architect position at Horizon Technologies." "Never heard of them," my father said, between bites. "They pay better than your current place." This was the moment I had been waiting for. Yes, significantly better. The base salary is $400,000 a year. The reaction was immediate. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Amanda's eyes widened to perfect circles. My father stopped chewing mid-bite, then slowly resumed his expression, calculating. $400,000, my mother repeated, her voice hushed, as if saying it too loudly might make it disappear. "Oh, Harley, that is wonderful." "My little brother is rich," Amanda exclaimed, reaching over to punch my arm playfully. I always knew all that computer stuff would pay off someday. My father remained silent, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. He took a long swig of his beer, set it down deliberately, then fixed his gaze on me. "When do you start?" he asked. 3 weeks from Monday, I replied. "I need to wrap things up at my current job first." "And when does the first paycheck come in?" The question struck me as odd, but I answered anyway. "They pay bi-weekly, so probably about 5 weeks from now." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. The conversation moved on to other topics, my mother asking about the office location, Amanda wondering if I would be buying a new car. The initial tension I had felt began to ease. Maybe this would be the positive turning point in our relationship I had hoped for. After dinner, as we moved to the living room with slices of the cheesecake I had brought for dessert, my father cleared his throat loudly, a sound I recognized from childhood as his preamble to an important pronouncement. "Your mother and I have been talking," he began, though this was clearly news to my mother, whose expression showed confusion, about our retirement and Amanda's future. I nodded, waiting for him to continue, a knot beginning to form in my stomach. "We have supported you your whole life," he said, using the same phrase he always deployed before asking for money. "Put a roof over your head, food in your mouth, clothes on your back. Now you have finally made it thanks to the foundation we provided. I appreciate everything you have done," I said carefully, already sensing where this was heading. "Good, because now it is time for you to show that appreciation in a meaningful way." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "With your new salary, we have worked out what would be fair for everyone." Amanda was nodding along, suddenly very interested in the conversation. My mother looked down at her hands. 50% for us," my father stated flatly. 30% for your sister. No excuses." The room went silent. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline to what surely must be a joke. But his expression remained serious, expectant even. "You want 80% of my salary," I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "We raised you," he replied, as if that explained everything. "And now we need to secure our retirement. The house needs work, your mother deserves to stop working at that dental office, and I want to finally enjoy life after decades of supporting this family." "And I need to pay off my student loans," Amanda chimed in. "Plus, I want to open my own boutique someday. You know I have always dreamed of that." I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign that she found this as outrageous as I did, but she merely gave a small shrug. "Your father has thought this through," she said softly. "We are family after all." My mind was racing, doing quick calculations. They wanted $320,000 of my $400,000 salary. That would leave me with $80,000, which was actually less than I currently made. "That would leave me with less than what I make now," I pointed out. "But you will get raises and bonuses," my father countered. "And you have always been good at living frugally. Besides, what do you need all that money for? You are single, no kids. We have real needs." The conversation quickly devolved into an argument as I tried to explain that while I was happy to help them, giving up 80% of my income was simply not reasonable. My father's tone grew increasingly irritated. "After all we sacrificed for you," he said, his voice rising. "All the nights your mother stayed up helping with your homework, all the meals we put on the table, all the guidance we provided, and this is how you repay us, with selfishness." Amanda joined in, listing all the times she had been there for me emotionally over the years, as if that justified a $120,000 annual stipend. The more I resisted, the more intense their pressure became. "I have bills to pay too," I tried explaining, "and I want to buy a home, invest for my own future." "Your future?" my father scoffed. "What about our future? What about everything we gave up so you could have opportunities?" The argument reached its climax when my father stood up, towering over me just like he had when I was a child. "This is not a request, Harley. This is what you owe us. We are your family. If you turn your back on family, you have nothing." His expression hardened. "So what is it going to be? Are you with your family, or are you one of those ungrateful children who abandons the people who gave him life once he has money?" I looked around at the three expectant faces, each with their own version of entitlement, and suddenly saw with perfect clarity what the rest of my life would look like if I agreed to their demands. This would never end. The percentages might change, but the expectation that my earnings belonged more to them than to me would remain constant. "I need some air," I said, standing up and walking out the front door without waiting for a response. Behind me, I heard my father call out, "Think carefully about your next move, son. Family is forever, but so are the consequences of turning your back on us." The cool evening air hit my face as I walked to my car, hands shaking slightly as I fumbled for my keys. I did not pull out of the driveway immediately, just sat behind the wheel trying to process what had just happened. The champagne I had brought to celebrate my achievement now seemed like a cruel joke. I drove aimlessly around the neighborhood where I grew up, past the elementary school with its faded playground equipment, past the corner store, where I had bought penny candy as a kid, past the park where I had spent countless hours alone, when the tension at home became too much. Each familiar landmark seemed to carry the weight of memories, most of them tinged with the same dynamics I had just experienced at dinner. My phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages from Amanda and my mother, but I ignored them. I needed space to think, to understand my own feelings, without their voices in my head. After about an hour of driving in circles, I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner that had been a refuge during my high school years. The same neon sign flickered above the entrance, promising comfort food and anonymity. Sliding into a booth, I ordered coffee and tried to sort through the tumult of emotions. Anger, certainly, disappointment, hurt. But beneath those immediate reactions was something deeper, a profound sadness at the recognition that the family I had always hoped for, the one that would be proud of my achievements and happy for my success, did not exist. I flashed back to my 16th birthday, when I had saved up for months to buy parts to build my first computer. My father had discovered the components hidden in my closet and accused me of wasting money on toys when the family needed new tires for the car. He had made me return everything and hand over the refund money. The computer that could have been the start of my portfolio of work was sacrificed for tires on a car I was rarely allowed to drive. Then there was my high school graduation, when I received an academic achievement award and scholarship. While the parents of other students took photos and planned celebration dinners, my father had simply asked, "Will this scholarship cover all the costs, or are we going to have to pay something?" The accomplishment itself meant nothing, only its financial implications for him. As these memories flooded back, I realized this pattern had been constant throughout my life. My achievements were valued not for what they represented about my growth or character, but solely for how they could benefit my parents and sister financially. I had never been seen as an individual with my own dreams and needs, only as a resource to be tapped. Around midnight, I finally called Michael. Despite the late hour, he answered on the second ring. "What is up? Everything okay?" His voice was alert, concerned. I explained what had happened at dinner, my words pouring out in a rush. When I reached the part about my father demanding 80% of my salary, Michael let out a low whistle. "That is not family supporting each other, Harley. That is exploitation," he said firmly. "No reasonable parent asks for that kind of arrangement." "But they raised me," I said, echoing my father's justification despite myself. "Do not I owe them something for that?" "Parents choose to have children, and raising them is the basic responsibility that comes with that choice," Michael replied. "Supporting your parents in their old age is one thing. Becoming their cash cow is another entirely." We talked for nearly an hour, Michael helping me see the situation from outside the fog of family dynamics. He shared stories of his own parents, who had celebrated his career successes and refused financial help even when he offered it, insisting he save for his own future first. "What they are asking is not normal," he emphasized. "It is not what loving parents do." After hanging up, I drove back to my apartment, but sleep eluded me. I sat at my computer researching family financial abuse and found article after article describing dynamics that felt eerily familiar. Adult children being guilt-tripped into supporting able-bodied parents, the weaponization of family obligation, the use of emotional manipulation to extract financial support. I began calculating what my life would look like if I gave in to their demands. After taxes, my $400,000 salary would net about $270,000. Giving 80% of that to my family would leave me with $54,000 a year, significantly less than my current take-home pay. I would be working a high-stress, demanding job while living with less financial freedom than I had now. The down payment for a home would remain a distant dream. Retirement savings would be minimal. And for what, so my father could retire early, so Amanda could pursue her boutique dreams without having to save or get a business loan like everyone else. I thought about all the times I had tried to establish reasonable boundaries around money. The time I had offered to pay for a financial advisor to help my parents budget their income, only to be accused of trying to control them. The time I had suggested Amanda look into student loan forgiveness programs, only to be told I was being stingy. Every attempt at helping in a sustainable way had been rejected in favor of direct cash transfers that disappeared into the black hole of my family's finances. As dawn broke, I reached a moment of clarity. This pattern would never end unless I ended it. No amount of money would ever be enough. No achievement would ever be celebrated for its own sake. The goalposts would always move, the demands would always increase, and I would forever be trying to buy the approval and love that should have been freely given. I realized that standing up for myself was not selfish, as my father had always claimed when I resisted his demands. It was necessary for my own survival and well-being, and perhaps in some distant future, it might even be the catalyst for a healthier relationship with my family, though I was not naive enough to count on that outcome. With this clarity came a plan. It would not be easy, and it would certainly not be without emotional cost. But for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, my future, and my right to enjoy the fruits of my own labor. The decision felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. The next morning I woke up with a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. The path forward was clear if difficult. I needed to break the financial ties that had kept me bound to unhealthy family dynamics for so long. This would require careful planning and quick execution before my resolve could be weakened by guilt or manipulation. My first stop was a new bank across town where I opened checking and savings accounts. I provided my new work address rather than my home address for all correspondence. Next, I contacted my current bank and arranged to close my accounts once all outstanding checks and automatic payments had cleared with instructions to transfer the remaining balance to my new accounts. At a local phone store, I purchased a new cell phone with a new number which would become my primary contact after I executed my plan. I would keep my old phone active temporarily to avoid raising suspicions but would eventually phase it out. Back at my apartment, I created a detailed inventory of my possessions, identifying what was truly important to me versus what could be replaced. I had always lived fairly minimally, a habit from years of financial insecurity which now worked in my favor. My most valuable possessions were my computer equipment, important documents, and a few sentimental items from my grandparents who had passed away years ago. Online, I researched apartments in a neighborhood closer to my new job. By midday, I had scheduled 3 viewings for that afternoon. The second property I visited was perfect. A 1-bedroom with a home office nook in a secure building with underground parking. The leasing agent, impressed by my new job offer letter and excellent credit score, approved my application on the spot. I signed a 12-month lease and paid the security deposit plus first month's rent from my savings. Next came the most tedious but necessary step, addressing the various bills I had been paying for my family. Over the years, I had somehow become responsible for their cell phone family plan, their internet service, various streaming subscriptions, and even making occasional payments on my sister's student loans when she claimed to be short on cash. One by one, I contacted each company. I would like to remove myself from this account, I told the cell phone company representative. The other lines should remain active, but I will no longer be financially responsible after the current billing cycle. Similar conversations followed with the internet provider, streaming services, and other utilities. For services that required notice, I scheduled the changes to take effect at the end of the current billing period. For Amanda's student loans, I simply removed my bank account from the automatic payment system. By late afternoon, I had rented a small moving truck for the following day and purchased packing supplies. Back at my apartment, I began methodically boxing up my life. Clothes, books, kitchen items, electronics, all carefully packed and labeled. The efficiency of my packing reflected the clarity of my decision, each sealed box another step toward independence. That evening, I drove back to my childhood home one last time. I had deliberately chosen a time when I knew my family would be out. My father at his weekly poker game, my mother at her book club, and Amanda usually out with friends on Friday evenings. Using my key, I entered the silent house and made my way to my old bedroom, which had been partially converted to storage after I moved out, but still contained boxes of my childhood belongings. The room felt smaller than I remembered, the faded posters on the walls, remnants of earlier dreams and interests. I sat on the edge of the twin bed that remained against one wall, running my hand over the worn quilt my grandmother had made. For a moment, nostalgia threatened to weaken my resolve, memories of rare, happy moments, mixing with the more prevalent, difficult ones. I reminded myself that I was not erasing my past or my family from my life completely. I was simply establishing boundaries that should have existed all along. With renewed determination, I filled 2 boxes with the items that mattered: photographs, academic awards, the few gifts that had actually been thoughtful, a small collection of books that had shaped my thinking. Before leaving, I sat at the small desk and wrote a letter explaining my decision. The words came more easily than I expected, years of unspoken feelings finding their way onto the page. Dear Dad, Mom, and Amanda, by the time you read this, I will have moved to a new apartment and changed my contact information. This decision comes after much reflection on our relationship, particularly regarding finances. The demand that I turn over 80% of my salary to you was the final evidence that you see me not as a son and brother, but as a source of income. This is not a healthy dynamic for any of us. I have removed myself from all family bills I have been paying. These financial responsibilities are now yours, as they should have been all along. I am not doing this out of spite, but out of the necessity to establish boundaries that should have existed long ago. I need time and space to reassess our relationship. Any future contact will need to be based on mutual respect rather than financial expectations. Harley. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter where it would be easily found. Looking around the house one last time, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and liberation. Then I walked out the door, locking it behind me. The next morning, with the help of 2 movers I had hired for a few hours, I loaded everything from my apartment into the truck. By noon, I was unloading at my new place. The entire process was completed with military precision, a clean break from one chapter of my life to the next. That first night in my new apartment, sitting on my couch surrounded by boxes, I experienced conflicting emotions. There was guilt, certainly years of conditioning, making me question if I had done something terrible. There was anxiety about the inevitable fallout when my family discovered my letter. But overshadowing these was an unfamiliar feeling of lightness, as if a weight I had carried for so long had finally been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in my adult life, my financial resources were truly my own. My future belonged to me alone. The road ahead would not be easy, but it was at last mine to travel as I chose. The explosion came sooner than I had anticipated. At 8:30 the next morning, my old phone erupted with notifications, a barrage of texts and voicemails from my family. I had expected anger, but the sheer volume and intensity still caught me off guard. My father's voicemails escalated from confusion to rage in the span of 3 messages. Harley, where are you? Your mother found your letter. Call us immediately so we can discuss this misunderstanding. Then I cannot believe you would pull this kind of stunt. After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us, by running away like a child. And finally, you listen to me, son. You have one day to come to your senses and apologize to your mother. She is crying her eyes out because of your selfishness. One day, or you will regret it. Amanda's messages were no less forceful, though her approach leaned more heavily on guilt than threats. How could you do this to us? Mom is devastated. Dad is furious. And what about me? I was counting on your help for my boutique. My dream is just worthless to you, I guess. You have always been selfish, but this is a new low. My mother's messages were the hardest to hear, her voice soft and trembling. Harley, sweetie, please call me. Just me, not your father. I do not understand what happened. We are family. We are supposed to help each other. Please come home so we can talk. I listened to each message, allowing myself to feel the pain and guilt they were designed to trigger, but I did not call back. Instead, I sent a single text to all 3 of them from my old phone. I need space and time. My decision stands. Please respect my boundaries. Then I silenced the phone and focused on settling into my new apartment and preparing for my upcoming job. I had given myself a week between jobs to get organized and decompress, time that now proved essential for dealing with the family crisis I had precipitated. The messages continued throughout the day, alternating between anger, bargaining, and emotional manipulation. By evening, they had taken a darker turn, with my father threatening to come to my workplace and straighten things out in person. That was concerning enough for me to save the voicemail as evidence, just in case. The next morning, my old email inbox contained messages from extended family members, aunts, uncles, and cousins. I rarely spoke to all, expressing their shock at my abandonment of my parents and sister. It was clear my father had been making calls, recruiting allies in his campaign to bring me back in line. Some messages were sympathetic to him, citing his sacrifices as a parent. Others were more measured, suggesting family counseling or mediation. My father's brother, Uncle Steve, who had always been somewhat of an outsider in the family himself, sent a different kind of message. "Harley, I do not know exactly what happened, but knowing my brother, I can guess. Call me if you need someone to talk to who understands the family dynamics. Sometimes distance is necessary for health. Take care of yourself." That small show of support meant more than I could express, a reminder that not everyone viewed family obligations through the same distorted lens my parents did. 3 days after my departure, the situation escalated dramatically. I was at a coffee shop near my new apartment working on some preparation materials for my new job when my phone lit up with a call from a number I did not recognize. Normally I would have let it go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. "Is this Harley?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Diane from Human Resources at Horizon Technologies. There is a situation in our lobby I think you should be aware of." My stomach dropped as she explained that 3 people claiming to be my family were demanding to speak with me, becoming increasingly loud and disruptive when told I did not start work until next week and was not in the building. "They are insisting on leaving a message with someone from your department," she continued. "Security is handling it, but I thought you should know." I thanked her, ended the call, and sat in stunned disbelief. They had tracked down my new employer and shown up in person, potentially damaging my professional reputation before I had even started. The boundary violation was staggering. That evening I received an email from the HR director at Horizon, expressing concern about the incident and requesting a meeting before my start date to discuss the situation and ensure it does not impact your work environment. The professional tone could not mask the underlying message: my family drama was now threatening my career opportunity. The stress began affecting my sleep and concentration. I found myself jumping at unexpected sounds, half expecting to find my family at my door. The building had secure entry, and I had not given them my new address, but their appearance at my workplace demonstrated a determination I had underestimated. After a week of escalating harassment, including my father somehow obtaining my new cell number and leaving increasingly threatening messages, I realized I needed professional help. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney specializing in harassment cases. The attorney, a straightforward woman named Janet Reeves, listened carefully to my account of events, reviewing the voicemails, texts, and email documentation I had preserved. "What your family is doing constitutes harassment," she confirmed. "The appearance at your workplace is particularly concerning, as it crosses the line from personal conflict into potentially affecting your professional life." She outlined my options, which included a formal cease and desist letter as a first step, followed by a restraining order if the harassment continued. The idea of taking legal action against my own family felt extreme, but I was running out of alternatives. "Think of it this way," Janet said, noting my hesitation. "If these were not your family members but former business associates or acquaintances behaving this way, would you hesitate to protect yourself?" She had a point. I authorized her to draft a cease and desist letter, making it clear that further contact at my workplace would result in legal action. The letter was delivered to my parents' house the following day. The response was immediate and predictable. A fresh wave of messages accusing me of betrayal, of choosing legal strangers over blood relations, of breaking my mother's heart. But notably, there were no more appearances at my workplace, suggesting the letter had made at least some impact. Meanwhile, I learned through a former neighbor that my family's financial situation had indeed deteriorated rapidly following my departure. The internet had been shut off for non-payment. My father's car had been repossessed. Amanda had been forced to pick up additional shifts at the boutique to help with expenses. Part of me felt guilty knowing they were struggling. Another part recognized that this was simply the reality of living within one's actual means, something they had avoided for years by using me as a financial safety net. "Their financial problems are not your doing," Michael reminded me during one of our regular check-ins. "You did not cause their situation by removing yourself from it. You just stopped preventing the natural consequences of their choices." It was a perspective I needed to hear repeatedly, as I worked to deprogram years of conditioning that had taught me their problems were automatically my responsibility. As my start date at Horizon approached, I met with the HR director to address the family situation professionally. I explained that I was handling a personal matter that had briefly spilled over into the professional realm, assured her that steps had been taken to prevent any recurrence, and expressed my commitment to keeping personal issues from affecting my work. She was understanding but direct. Horizon values work-life balance, but we also expect our team members to ensure personal matters do not disrupt the workplace. I appreciate your transparency and the steps you have taken. I left the meeting with my job intact, but with a clear understanding that I was starting under heightened scrutiny. My family's actions had created yet another obstacle for me to overcome this time in my professional life. The first few months after breaking ties with my family were some of the most challenging of my life. Despite the clear logic behind my decision, years of emotional programming did not disappear overnight. I struggled with waves of guilt, moments of doubt, and the persistent question of whether I had done something unforgivable by prioritizing my own well-being. 2 weeks into my new job at Horizon, I recognized that I needed professional help to navigate these emotions. Through my company's health insurance, I found Dr. Karen Chen, a therapist specializing in family trauma and boundary setting. Our first session was revealing. What you are experiencing is a normal response to breaking deeply entrenched patterns, she explained after I recounted my story. The guilt, the second-guessing, even the physical symptoms like trouble sleeping, these are all common when someone steps away from a dysfunctional family system. Over the following weeks, our sessions helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped my relationship with my family. I learned about concepts like financial abuse, emotional blackmail, and the parentification of children. Most importantly, I began to recognize that my worth was not tied to what I could provide for others. Healthy family relationships are reciprocal, Dr. Chen emphasized. Support flows in multiple directions based on need and ability, not as a one-way obligation. As I gained emotional clarity, I also took practical steps to secure my future. With guidance from a financial advisor, I developed a comprehensive plan for my new income. I maxed out my retirement contributions, established an emergency fund, and began saving for a down payment on a condo. For the first time, I was planning my financial future, based on my own goals and values, not on anticipation of the next family crisis. The harassment from my family gradually decreased, though it never fully stopped. The cease and desist letter had established consequences they seemed unwilling to test, though occasional messages still came through new phone numbers or email addresses, typically around holidays or family birthdays. 3 months after starting at Horizon, I felt secure enough in my position to approach the issue of my family from a position of strength rather than reaction. After consulting with Dr. Chen, I drafted a letter outlining terms under which I would consider providing limited financial support. My offer was structured and conditional. A monthly contribution of $2,000 paid not directly to my parents, but to a financial advisor who would help them create and stick to a budget. The support would continue only if they attended financial counseling sessions and demonstrated progress toward self-sufficiency. For Amanda, I offered to pay for business planning classes if she was serious about opening a boutique, but not to fund the business itself. The letter concluded with clear boundaries, no unscheduled contact, no discussions of money outside the established arrangement, and no disparaging comments or emotional manipulation. Any violation would result in immediate termination of support. I sent the letter through my attorney, maintaining the professional buffer I had established. The response took nearly 2 weeks to arrive, suggesting lengthy family discussions. My father's handwriting was instantly recognizable on the envelope. Inside was a terse rejection of my terms. We do not need your charity with strings attached. Either you help your family properly or not at all. While disappointing, the response was not surprising. The offer had never been primarily about the money, but about establishing a framework for a healthier relationship. Their rejection confirmed what I had suspected: the financial support had been less important to them than the control it represented. You gave them an opportunity to choose a different path. Dr. Chen reminded me during our next session that they declined. It is their choice, not your failure. As months passed, I settled into my new role at Horizon, gradually building a reputation for innovative solutions and reliable delivery. The work was challenging, but fulfilling, pushing me to grow professionally while providing the financial security I had worked toward for so long. My personal life began to expand as well. Freed from the constant drain of family crises, I had energy to invest in friendships and activities. I joined a local tech meetup group, started rock climbing at an indoor gym, and even took cooking classes, discovering interests I had never had time to explore. Through the climbing gym, I met Sophia, a software engineer with a quick wit and a refreshing directness. Our relationship developed slowly, beginning as climbing partners and evolving into something deeper. When I eventually shared my family situation with her, her response was supportive without being judgmental. "Families are complicated," she said simply. "You did what you needed to do for your own health." Sophia came from a close-knit family with healthy boundaries, a dynamic so different from my own experience that it seemed almost foreign. The first time I met her parents, I was struck by how they celebrated her accomplishments without taking credit for them, how they offered help without creating obligation, how they treated her as an adult with her own life rather than an extension of themselves. "Is this what normal families are like?" I asked Michael after that first meeting. "More or less," he confirmed. "Not perfect, but fundamentally supportive rather than extractive." 6 months into my estrangement from my family, I received an unexpected email from my mother, sent from a new address I did not recognize. Unlike previous communications, this one contained no guilt trips or demands, just a simple request to meet for coffee, just the two of us. After discussing it with Dr. Chen, I agreed to a brief meeting in a public place. My mother looked older than I, remembered more tired, the lines around her eyes deeper. We sat across from each other awkwardly, years of unspoken feelings creating a barrier between us. "Your father does not know I am here," she said after we had exchanged stilted pleasantries. "Things have been difficult since you left." She explained that they had been forced to downsize, moving from the family home into a smaller apartment. My father had taken on extra shifts at the dealership. Amanda had moved in with a friend to save on rent. "I am not telling you this to make you feel bad," she added quickly, "just so you know what has been happening." For the first time in our relationship, my mother seemed to be speaking as herself, not as an extension of my father. We talked for nearly an hour, avoiding the topic of money entirely, instead sharing small updates about our lives. Before we parted, she hugged me briefly. "I am proud of you," she whispered. "I should have said that more." That meeting became the first tentative step toward a new kind of relationship with my mother, limited but more authentic than what had existed before. We began exchanging occasional emails, sharing small parts of our lives without expectations or demands. My father and sister remained distant, unwilling to accept the new boundaries. I heard through my mother that my father dismissed my success as luck and my boundaries as selfishness, narratives that allowed him to avoid examining his own role in our estrangement. Rather than dwelling on what could not be changed, I focused on building the life I wanted. At the 1-year mark in my new position, I received an excellent performance review and a substantial bonus. With my savings and the bonus combined, I had enough for a down payment on a modest but modern condo in a neighborhood I loved. The day I signed the closing papers was significant, beyond the financial milestone it represented. Standing in what was now my home, I realized how far I had come from the scared, guilty person who had packed his belongings in secret just 1 year earlier. I had established a career I was proud of, created a home that was truly mine, built relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, and most importantly learned that taking care of myself was not selfish, but necessary. That evening, sitting on the floor of my new living room with Sophia and Michael sharing takeout and champagne amid the boxes still waiting to be unpacked, I felt a sense of peace I had not known was possible. The journey had been painful, the loss is real, but the freedom I had found was worth every difficult step. Looking back at the past year, I realized that the $400,000 job was never really the point of my story. It was simply the catalyst that forced me to confront patterns that had been harmful for years. The true value of what I gained was not measured in dollars, but in self-respect, in boundaries honored, in the quiet dignity of owning my own life. For anyone facing similar struggles with family financial exploitation, know that it is possible to break free. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is necessary. True family supports your growth rather than stifling it for their benefit. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for those who would take advantage of you is to say no. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones who were taking advantage of your success? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content about overcoming family financial abuse and building healthy relationships. Remember, standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary for your well-being, and even for those who may eventually learn from the boundaries you set. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in your own.